The way I talk about it is we're going to do fewer things, but we're going to do fewer things better.
When Trump pushed his latest round of tariffs, he expected corporations to fall in line. But Starbucks did the opposite. They packed up key operations and left the US altogether. But the real bombshell came days later with an email sent from a White House aide that could change everything. Starbucks stuns the world. Starbucks has packed up its espresso machines and issued what critics are calling a caffeinated middle finger to American economic policy. Why? Because of Trump's tariffs, specifically the economic blitzkrieg he waged in his second term, a bold tariff strategy that some called genius and others called economic self-sabotage. And guess what? Starbucks wasn't going to sit around and sip lukewarm lattes while their profit margins boiled over. Instead, they did the unthinkable. But what's even more shocking, this bold retaliation triggered a legal meltdown of Trumpian proportions. But first, let's get into how we got here.
The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
Starbucks has been quietly struggling, not in terms of brand, they still sling over 100 million cups a week, but in terms of operational chaos, spiraling costs, and a deeply unhappy workforce. So when Trump's tariff tsunami hit everything from steel to soybeans, it rattled the coffee industry, especially big chains like Starbucks, whose supply chains span the globe.
Even though it's got challenges right now, it's a really strong economic model.
Starbucks' new CEO, Brian Niccol, the turnaround king from Chipotle, made it clear the company is trying to get back to basics, reduce complexity, boost speed, but tariffs on imported machinery, ingredients, and packaging materials made that nearly impossible. But what really sent them over the edge? The aluminum and steel tariffs, essential components in espresso machines, milk frothers, and even the foil packaging that keeps coffee beans fresh were now financial sinkholes. According to internal reports leaked by a former executive, Starbucks was spending 18% more on its essential operations within the US alone. So instead of eating those costs, Starbucks made a controversial move. They began shifting operations overseas, closing regional roasting plants in California and Washington, and opening new ones in India, Canada, and the UK. Quietly but methodically, they began outsourcing American jobs, while still maintaining storefronts in the US. But here's the kicker. Those storefronts were now selling imported Starbucks products, processed outside the country. Why? Because under trade loopholes, importing finished goods was now cheaper than making them here. You heard that right. Trump's tariffs made it more cost-effective for Starbucks to leave America than stay, and they weren't alone. Even Ford Motor Company warned this would happen.
President Trump's calling it Liberation Day. I call it Termination Day for American workers. I know, President Trump likes telling people you're fired. I didn't think he meant auto workers in the US when he said that.
That was just the beginning. But the real firestorm? Trump's reaction. He accused Starbucks of economic betrayal. Aides leaked that he reportedly told staffers, if they want to leave America, then America should leave them. The quote was picked up by several conservative outlets, and soon calls for boycotts and lawsuits exploded. And the lawsuits died fast and hard. Trump's allies pushed for legal action against Starbucks, claiming they had violated terms of US business subsidies and grants by moving production offshore. But here's the twist. Starbucks had receipts. They had documents showing they were never formally obligated to keep manufacturing stateside, and they pointed to Trump's own tariff hikes as the cause of their exodus. That lawsuit, it backfired horribly. Not only did the case get thrown out, but the court discovery process forced the Trump administration to release internal memos showing they had received warnings from multiple companies that tariffs would cause an exodus. Trump's own Secretary of Commerce warned that the policy would trigger mass relocations of US-based supply chains. That document, filed under a sealed exhibit, was accidentally made public for 14 hours on the DOJ website. Screenshots spread like wildfire, and then the public backlash intensified. People began asking, was this all part of the plan? Did Trump know these policies would hurt American companies but push them anyway to appease a political narrative? During a tense interview with ABC News, Trump defended the tariffs, even while admitting they were causing a little pain.
I don't think so. I think great times are ahead.
But when pressed again on how Starbucks and others were fleeing, Trump shifted tone.
You call that chickening out? Because we have $14 trillion now invested?
He claimed it was all part of a negotiation tactic and insisted that if Starbucks wanted to leave, they'll be back when the economy turns around. So here comes the million-dollar question. Can America afford this kind of dominance, or are we choking out our economy in the name of winning? The lawsuit is moving fast. Depositions are scheduled for mid-June. Former White House aides have already been subpoenaed. Starbucks is cooperating and documents are beginning to leak. This could very well turn into one of the biggest political economic scandals in modern history. And yet, if Trump runs in 2028 and wins, these same tactics could return with vengeance. So the next time you walk past a shuttered Starbucks, remember, it wasn't just a business decision. It was a consequence of power, of politics, of pride. Next up, universities across America are scrambling tonight after Secretary of State Marco Rubio signed a diplomatic cable, ordering U.S. embassies to immediately stop scheduling new interviews for student and exchange visitor visas. The move affects F, M, and J visa categories, covering everyone from doctoral students to summer camp counselors.
The United States is pausing all new student and exchange visitor visa interviews, which covers a broad swath of professions, from doctors to camp counselors, while it studies how to expand screening of applicants' social media posts, according to a State Department cable obtained by the NewsHour and signed by Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
The pause comes as the administration prepares to expand mandatory social media screening for all student visa applicants, building on existing requirements that have been in place since 2019. But this new directive goes much further. What exactly are they looking for? The expanded vetting will scrutinize content related to terrorism, anti-Semitism, or other activities deemed threatening to U.S. national security. Previous screening efforts focused on returning students involved in pro-Palestinian campus protests, but now every applicant faces this level of scrutiny.
Well, I think we should all take national security seriously, and so we do understand that. But I think the bigger question is, why international students specifically, right?
The timing isn't coincidental. This crackdown is part of a broader offensive against universities the Trump administration accuses of fostering liberal ideologies and failing to combat anti-Semitism. Harvard University has already been targeted. The administration attempted to revoke Harvard's ability to enroll international students and froze $2.65 billion in federal grants. Chinese students appear to be facing particular scrutiny. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese students attend U.S. universities annually, and Secretary Rubio has specifically highlighted concerns about students with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields. Beijing's response was swift and pointed. Chinese officials urged the U.S. to safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of international students, including those from China, signaling potential diplomatic tensions ahead.
Well, it may be 6% across the country, but in Colombia it's over 50%. At NYU it's over 50%. And where was all of the worst violence and anti-Semitism and the most violent protests and takeovers of buildings? It was Columbia, it was Harvard.
But what's the real impact here? The numbers are staggering. International students don't just fill classroom seats, they're economic powerhouses. In the 2023 to 2024 academic year, they collectively contributed $43.8 billion to the economy and supported 378,000 jobs. NAFSA's CEO Fanta Aw didn't mince words about the administration's approach. She condemned the visa pause, arguing that international students, who comprise less than 6% of U.S. college enrollment, are not a threat.
Well, we certainly have. We provide every year data on international students and the economic value of international students. And the latest data that we produce shows that they basically contribute close to $44 billion, and that translates into over 330,000 jobs.
For students caught in this bureaucratic freeze, the human cost is immediate and devastating. A Chinese master's student at the University of Pennsylvania worried about being chased back to China without completing their degree, while an Indian student in New Jersey faced delays that jeopardized scholarships. The ripple effects could reshape global education. Stricter policies may deter students from applying to U.S. universities, pushing them toward countries like Canada, Australia, or the UK, potentially eroding America's position as the world's premier education destination. Current wait times at U.S. embassies already range from days to months. This pause, combined with expanded vetting requirements, threatens to create unprecedented backlogs that could prevent students from enrolling in time for the fall semester. Then, on another news we have, what should have been a routine diplomatic meeting turned into an international incident when President Trump presented newspaper articles to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, falsely claiming anti-white racism and white genocide in South Africa. The May 21st Oval Office encounter has left diplomats scrambling and civil rights organizations condemning what they're calling divisive propaganda. The meeting, originally intended to strengthen U.S.-South Africa relations, took a sharp turn when Trump showed Ramaphosa cherry-picked videos and articles alleging white genocide. Multiple sources described the South African delegation as stone-faced and uninterested as Trump played clips in the Oval Office.
Look, these are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death. Horrible death. Death. I don't know.
But you know that
To pick anyone, white South Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws, and this is all. I mean, I'll give these to you. So when you say, what would I like to do? I don't know what to do. Just look at this. White South African couples say that they were attacked violently. And,
President Trump, when will you go and see for yourself if it is
Well, I could do that. Look, here's burial sites all over the place. These are all white farmers that are being buried.
Ramaphosa's response was measured but firm. The South African president dismissed the white genocide narrative as false, emphasizing that the presence of prominent white South Africans like Johann Rupert and John Steenhuisen on the trip contradicted such claims. The white genocide narrative that Trump amplified has been thoroughly debunked by fact-checking organizations. Data from South Africa's Institute for Security Studies shows that while farm attacks occur, they are not disproportionately targeted at white farmers. South Africa's murder rate is high overall, 45 per 100,000 people in 2022, affecting all groups with no clear racial targeting of whites. The numbers tell a different story than Trump's narrative. Agrese reported 47 farm murders in 2022, a small fraction of South Africa's 20,000 plus annual murders with no clear racial motive.
Now this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites, over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers.
The NAACP was quick to respond, condemning Trump's move as divisive propaganda, though the organization's specific statement details remain limited in available sources. The diplomatic fallout, however, was immediate and measurable. The Washington Post and Rolling Stone reported that Trump's focus on these disproven claims dominated the meeting, sidelining substantive diplomatic discussions. This wasn't Trump's first action affecting South Africa. Earlier in 2025, he had withheld financial aid to South Africa, citing land reform as seizing land from ethnic minority Afrikaners. The incident appears to stem from years of lobbying by Afrikaner rights groups and figures like Elon Musk, who have promoted these claims. Trump's reliance on cherry-picked articles and videos aligns with what critics call misinformation tactics, designed to appeal to right-wing U.S. audiences who have embraced the white genocide narrative. Ramaphosa's strategic response to avoid confrontation while firmly dismissing the claims reflects South Africa's effort to preserve bilateral ties despite the provocation. His inclusion of Rupert, a prominent white South African businessman, and Steenhuisen, leader of the Democratic Alliance, in the delegation was a deliberate signal of inclusivity that directly countered Trump's narrative. The international reaction has been telling. American media exposed the falsehoods, embarrassing Trump's stance, while the South African delegation's restraint mitigated immediate escalation. However, the incident underscores the risks of amplifying conspiracy theories in high-level diplomacy. For Trump, this appears to be part of a domestic political strategy, appealing to audiences who view these narratives through the lens of broader cultural and immigration debates. But diplomatically, the stunt has strained U.S.-South Africa relations at a time when both countries face complex global challenges, requiring cooperation rather than conspiracy theories. Next on the news, we have a tragic shootout incident. Tonight in Greensboro, North Carolina, a shooting death has marked the city's 15th homicide of 2025, as police continue their search for suspects in what authorities are calling an aggravated assault that turned deadly. The latest incident, reported by WPORNE 12 News, adds to a troubling pattern of violence that has plagued the city throughout 2025. Greensboro police are investigating the homicide while actively seeking suspects, though specific details about the perpetrators or their motives have not been disclosed as the investigation continues. This shooting comes on the heels of another tragic case that shook the community. Fox 8 News reported the death of a child in Greensboro, leading to first-degree murder charges against two individuals, Brandon Lewis Gordon and Alicia Javon McCoy. The child's death followed an assault reported on May 24, 2025, at a residence on Glenside Drive, where the child was found unresponsive and later died at a hospital. The pace of violence in Greensboro this year is alarming. To understand the trajectory, we need to look at earlier incidents that have contributed to this grim count. In February 2025, another shooting occurred at the 800 block of Willow Lake Road, where a man was found dead in a car. That incident was noted as the fourth homicide in Greensboro at that point in 2025, indicating a steady accumulation of violent crimes throughout the year. What makes these cases particularly concerning is their apparent randomness and variety. The February shooting was described by police as targeted, not random, suggesting different motives and perpetrator profiles across these incidents. The child homicide case introduces additional concerns about domestic violence or neglect, while the latest shooting remains under investigation with few public details available. The numbers paint a stark picture when compared to historical data. A 2024 article noted that Greensboro had 18 homicides by July 31st, 2024, and 61 for the entire year of 2023. If the current 2025 pace continues, with 15 homicides already recorded by late May, the city could potentially see a similar or higher annual total, depending on seasonal patterns patterns and the effectiveness of intervention efforts. The Greensboro Police Department's response strategy appears to emphasize community engagement. In the February case, authorities urged residents to provide tips via Crime Stoppers or direct contact, highlighting their reliance on public cooperation. However, the lack of specific details about the latest shooting suspects suggests that investigations face significant challenges in quickly identifying perpetrators. The community impact of this violence extends beyond the immediate victims and their families. Each homicide represents not just a life lost, but a community trauma that ripples through neighborhoods, affecting residents' sense of safety and quality of life. The variety of incidents, from targeted shootings to domestic violence cases, indicates that Greensboro is grappling with multiple forms of violence simultaneously. What's particularly troubling is the apparent acceleration of violence. With 15 homicides recorded by late May, Greensboro is on track to potentially exceed previous year's totals. This trend raises questions about underlying factors contributing to the violence: economic stress, social tensions, gun availability, or other systemic issues that may be driving the increase. The police department's ongoing search for suspects in the latest case reflects the challenges law enforcement faces in addressing this violence. Without community cooperation and witness testimony, many cases can remain unsolved, potentially emboldening perpetrators and leaving families without justice or closure. Looking at the broader implications, Greensboro's homicide rate reflects challenges common to many urban areas across America: gun violence, socioeconomic disparities, and the complex factors that contribute to criminal behavior. The city's response will likely need to involve not just law enforcement, but community organizations, social services, and violence prevention programs to address root causes, rather than just respond to incidents after they occur. The search for suspects in tonight's shooting continues, and police are urging anyone with information to come forward. As Greensboro grapples with its 15th homicide of 2025, the community faces the urgent question of how to break this cycle of violence before more lives are lost. Finally, in the shocking turn of events, reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley walked free from federal prison tonight after President Trump granted them full pardons for bank fraud and tax evasion convictions. The couple, known for their USA Network show, had been serving sentences since January 2023 for what prosecutors called a decade-long, multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The announcement came in dramatic fashion, a video posted on X showing Trump calling the Chrisleys' daughter Savannah from the Oval Office. Trump described the couple's treatment as pretty harsh and promised their release by May 29th.
Your parents are going to be free and clean, and I hope we can do it by tomorrow.
The crimes that landed them behind bars were serious and extensive. From 2007 to 2012, prosecutors alleged the Chrisleys defrauded Atlanta area community banks out of more than $36 million by submitting falsified financial documents. They spent the money on luxury cars, designer clothes, real estate, and travel, often using new fraudulent loans to repay older ones. The tax evasion was equally brazen. The couple was accused of hiding millions in earnings from Chrisley Knows Best to evade nearly $500,000 in delinquent taxes, failing to file returns or pay taxes for the years 2013 to 2016. In June 2022, after a 3-week trial, a federal jury found the Chrisleys guilty on all counts. The sentencing judge was particularly harsh, noting their lack of remorse and highlighting the greed and flamboyance in their actions. They were ordered to pay $17.8 million in restitution. The path to presidential clemency ran through their daughter Savannah, who mounted a sophisticated lobbying campaign. She spoke at the 2024 Republican National Convention, alleging her family was persecuted by rogue prosecutors due to their conservative beliefs. She appeared on Lara Trump's Fox News program and visited the White House in February 2025 to lobby for a pardon.
I was walking into the grocery store when I got the call from the president, and I was just in such shock and in such awe that the president himself called me and took the time to let me know that my family was coming back together.
Trump's pardon czar, Alice Marie Johnson, supported the decision and was present during the call to Savannah. The Chrisleys' attorney provided Johnson with court documents and testimonials arguing the couple was unfairly targeted due to their conservative values and high profile. The family's reaction was one of pure relief and gratitude. Savannah, wearing a MAGA hat, told reporters outside Pensacola prison that the process was absolutely insane, but expressed gratitude for reuniting with her father. Chase posted on Instagram, "Our rocks are back," thanking Trump for bringing their family together.
The president called me personally as I was walking into Sam's Club and notified me that he was signing pardon paperwork for both of my parents. So both my parents are coming home tonight or tomorrow, and I still don't believe it's real. I'm freaking out.
But not everyone celebrated. Federal officials expressed dismay at the pardons, with an assistant U.S. attorney telling NBC News that high-profile pardons were demoralizing. The official questioned why they work so hard to enforce the law when everything we do can be erased with the stroke of a pen. The pardons raise significant questions about the use of presidential clemency power. While Trump's authority is constitutionally unrestricted, critics argue that pardoning the Chrisleys, convicted after a jury trial and upheld on appeal, undermines the rule of law. The prosecution presented substantial evidence of a decade-long fraud scheme, and the couple's lack of remorse was noted by the sentencing judge. However, supporters argue the sentences were unusually harsh. The Chrisleys' sentences, 12 and 7 years, were notably severe compared to similar white-collar crimes, where sentences often range from 2 to 5 years. Their celebrity status may have made them targets for high-profile prosecution. The timing of these pardons is significant. Trump announced them as part of a series of high-profile clemency actions, including pardons for former Virginia Sheriff Scott Jenkins and former GOP Congressman Michael Grimm, framing these actions as addressing an unjust justice system. The Chrisleys are already planning their comeback. They're set to star in a new Lifetime docuseries exploring their post-prison experiences and Savannah's advocacy efforts. The series may attempt to rebrand them as resilient figures overcoming adversity, though public reception remains uncertain given their convictions. For critics like Joe Exotic, still in prison, the pardons highlight perceived inconsistencies in Trump's clemency decisions. Exotic wrote on X, "Being innocent is not enough," questioning why some receive presidential mercy while others don't. The legal implications are clear. The pardons nullify their remaining sentences and probation, though the $17.8 million restitution order may still apply. But the political implications may be more lasting, setting the tone for Trump's approach to presidential clemency in his second term. To keep up with the latest news, be sure to check the suggested cards on your screen so you don't miss anything.